Hello. Welcome, everyone. Welcome, Sandy and Joyce. Today, we're going to talk about corporate investment responsibility, ESG, and to do that, I'm going to welcome Joyce Cacho, because Joyce, Joyce has tremendous expertise in global supply chain management and corporate sustainability and governance. She did her PhD at the University of Missouri. Nice, right? Columbia, yeah. University of Missouri, Columbia. She's a CFA, but she also has her CAMS certification, which I loved, which is the Certified Anti-Money Laundering Specialist, which is very important. After her career in the private sector, she then became board chair of Sistema Bio. She served on the board of Land O'Lakes and Sunrise Banks North America. She's on the supervisory board of the World Benchmarking Alliance, which helps corporations meet the 2030 sustainability goals, the Sustainable Development Goals, along with family and friends that she always brings to her new home in South Boston. She's also, like me, a runner, and we're going to hit the streets later at some point. And most importantly for us, immediately in 2021, she joined the College of the Atlantic board, which we are so excited to have her. So, and from there on, I'm just going to pass it to you. And thank you so much, Joyce. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Darren. And welcome to each of you here with us here at the Davis Center of Human Ecology on the COA campus, and to those of you near and far who are joining us via the internet. Today's Coffee and Conversation is the fifth in the series of Coffee and Conversations for this summer 2023. It's an extra treat to experience the Davis Center, which Sandy got a tour of before we began this morning, and see the innovative technology being used not only in this building, but in the residential hall, which is being built with a wooden structure design that's becoming more popular because of its environmental benefits. So, enjoy today, as well as come on over, come on up, come on down, come on out to participate in the next three Coffee and Conversation sessions. The last one will be held on Friday, September 8th. As Darren mentioned, our topic today is mission alignment and investment portfolios. And we are thrilled and honored to be in conversation with Sandy Urie. Not any Sandy Urie. July 31st, 2023, retired from day-to-day servant leadership in building Cambridge Associates, Sandy Urie. Sandy Urie, who began focusing on mission alignment and investment portfolios when it was niche, novel, alternative. Remember those words? Sandy Urie, who is consistent about mission alignment in investment portfolios by serving on the advisory committee for the Diverse Manager Initiative at Stanford University, and as a board member of the Intentional Endowments Network. Sandy Urie, who is with us today, has seen it all, from alternative to where we sit today, that these strategies are truly mainstream and about building better and larger pies so that everybody has a stake. Please join me in welcoming Sandy Urie.
Thank you. Thank you, Joyce.
Sandy and I have had so much fun getting to discuss and prepare, and if you were lucky, you could have been a fly on the wall and had this session with us a few times over. But I'll open with asking you, Sandy, newly retired Sandy, how's it going? What's changed? Any new priorities?
Well, I spent 38 years at Cambridge Associates. So I joined Cambridge in 1985, and it's a big part of my identity, I have to say. I was chair and CEO for 16 of those years while we were building the firm. But for the last 7 years, I've been working on impact investing and mission-aligned investing with clients. I stepped aside from being chair and CEO, but was asked to stay on. And I said, I'll stay on if I can work on this, do a really deep dive into this area that I think is so important to investors and to our future, to our world. And the new CEO said, sure, stay on. I thought it would be 2 or 3 years. It ended up being 7. But now I'm ready. I'm ready for the next step. I'm ready for that transition. And I will still be busy, Joyce, because as you mentioned, I serve on some boards, the board of Intentional Endowment Network, Social Finance, my alma mater, Stanford, and they launched the Diverse Manager Initiative for their investment program a year and a half ago, and they asked me to chair it. So I'm chairing it, and we're looking for new and talented managers to add to the portfolio there, and it's really exciting work to be doing. I have a great committee, and so I'm busy. I have a couple of corporate boards, and I help a couple of families with thinking about how to invest their assets. Philanthropic families who are very committed to impact investing. So I'm happy to be on their stewardship committee or their advisory committee. So I think I'm going to be busy, but I know I'm going to be busy. But it's taking what I've learned over decades now at Cambridge Associates, and it's applying it and doing that deep dive into the areas that are of particular and important interest to me.
And when you spend 38 years building a firm such as Cambridge Associates, in truth in advertising, Cambridge Associates, shout out to the team there. They're
Yes,
managing.
I think they might be watching as we're speaking. I think my colleagues who work with the college said they were going to stream today. So hi, Peter and team.
Lovely, lovely, lovely. Because COA, way back in 2006, joined with 11 other colleges and university presidents to initiate the American College and University President's Climate Commitment. We continue to report every 3 years, according to the Association of Advancement of Sustainability in Higher Education, STARS, and you're welcome to go to their website and see what we're doing, why we invest on our campus the way we do, what our students are asking us to do more of, etc. Maybe we could talk about what's different today, and for example, chairing the Diversity Investors Initiative at Stanford, from when you started 38 years ago.
Okay, a lot has happened. A lot has happened. In 1985, when I joined Cambridge Associates, we called it Socially Responsible Investing, SRI. There are many acronyms associated with this area: MRI, SRI, ESG. You've probably heard them all. Essentially, they all fall under what I think of as the mission-aligned umbrella. In 1985, it was about divestment from South Africa. That was the main issue on the table. People weren't really thinking about the environment. They weren't thinking about social justice issues. Well, they were. South Africa was absolutely a social justice issue. And that was where I spent many, many hours in boardrooms listening to students and faculty protesting outside as boards were meeting and trying to figure out, how do we do our fiduciary duty if we limit the choices we have to invest for this university, this college, this museum. And those were really hard conversations. There were people in the room who absolutely felt it was the right thing to do. And there were people in the room who said, we're not promoting social agendas. We're here to invest and earn as much return as we possibly can, so this institution, this college, this museum, can achieve its mission. So there was real conflict. And it did get resolved because Bishop Sullivan developed what was called the Sullivan Principles, which was kind of a code of conduct for corporate America. And as corporations subscribe to the Sullivan Principles, more and more colleges and universities and other investors could say, okay, we can embrace the Sullivan Principles. Those are kind of an activist way of engaging as opposed to a look for the exit way of engaging. And we can apply pressure through activist action. And so it worked its way out. And very soon on the heels of that, the Valdez spill happened. And then that's when the environmental radar went up and said, wait a second, what are we doing now with regard to the environment? How do we manage our investments in a way that is responsible with regard to the environment? So it started with divestment, and then I think it moved to action, to activist. And so being an activist means filing shareholder resolutions. It means having a voice at the table. And so the activity picked up in that space. And there were firms that were founded to help you figure out how to vote your proxies. So you could vote your proxies in line with your institutional values. And then we moved to ESG. And ESG, as we all know, is environmental, social, and governance. A little bit in the crosshairs right now, but I will tell you that investors at Cambridge Associates are not abandoning it. They believe in it. They think it's the right way to invest. And I would define it as just plain old, good old-fashioned good investing. You take into consideration every risk a company faces when you decide whether or not you're going to invest your hard-earned money in it. And let's face it, environment is a risk. If you pollute the environment, you're at risk for regulatory action, you're at risk for fines, there's an economic penalty for doing that. There are penalties for being poorly governed. There are penalties for not paying attention to your stakeholders. Social is, and I think of it as stakeholders. It's not just your shareholders, they're very important, don't get me wrong, but your employees, the community you live in, your customers. These are all stakeholders. And so when you think about social, it encompasses more of a stakeholder perspective. And so we see that now as being much more mainstream. And then finally, the kind of the fourth thing I'd call out is impact. How do we invest in ways that will actually do good? How do we help find new ways of dealing with environmental carbon capture, water, sustainable ag, affordable housing, environmental and social justice issues where you can actually have an impact, as opposed to walking away or divesting. You can say, I want to do some good here, and I'm going to use my money to invest in something that will have a positive impact and advance the solutions that we need to have to do good in the world.
So you've focused on, Cambridge Associates has focused on philanthropy. You will continue to advise some folks with deep pockets who are really intentional about what that deep pocket money is supposed to go towards for the next generations. Maybe we can talk a little bit about why philanthropy and why this is now mainstream, including in pension funds.
So I don't know how many of you are familiar with Cambridge Associates. We're 50 years old this year, and we were founded to advise university endowments. So we didn't start in the pension fund world. We do advise some pension funds now, but we started with university endowments and then expanded to colleges. COA is part of our wonderful group of clients. I should say theirs now that I'm retired. It will always be ours. New language. So right now we have probably 650 endowed nonprofit institutions as clients. That is the core of our business. So these are mission-driven organizations. So they've always thought about how to integrate mission with their total enterprise. Not just here we think of COA, a sustainable campus, but also an investment pool that represents the values and the mission of this institution. And so our clients have often been in that space. And also I'd say that pension funds have been in that space. We advise philanthropists, high net worth investors who found their way to us by sitting on the boards of the nonprofits we advise. So we have a large business where we're advising wealthy individuals, many of whom embrace the mission objectives of the institutions where they serve and want to manage their money and invest their money in the same way that their institutions that they care so deeply about are. And we have our first private client came to the firm in 1982. We were founded in 1973 and came to, to get our investment advice. But what I love is the more we help them increase their wealth, the more that flows to the nonprofits we're serving. They're very generous. They are extremely generous. And that makes sense because they're already serving on the boards of the institutions we advise. So there's a nice synergy, kind of a virtuous circle there that has worked over time. With pensions, it's the beneficiaries that we see a movement now to restrict pensions, particularly public pensions, from investing in certain areas and you want to say, wait a second, the pension exists for the beneficiaries. Again, it's not there for political reasons. So how can you say to a pension chief investment officer, no, you can't do this? If the chief investment officer thinks, well, yeah, we have to do this if we're going to serve our beneficiaries and really discharge our fiduciary duty on their behalf. So it's an interesting time of challenge, I think, in this space.
If I can come into the conversation part of our time together. We are living longer. Most people are living longer. And we have defined benefit plans that actually were modeled on us living shorter. So, short of saying go jump off a bridge, we have to fill a gap between the length of time folks are living and the benefits that they're going to get from these defined benefit plans. And the beautiful thing about time in your 38 years in this space is that it used to be thought social responsible investment, but less return. And what we are living in today is socially responsible investment and more, and on par, if not better, returns than you get when you overlook the environment, when you overlook your community, your employees, etc. And so it's a pivot point, really, in responding to something that we all know are happening. I'm blessed to have a 96-year-old father who is still alive and kicking, not playing tennis anymore and not driving, but still here. And he, along with other folks, needs that money to last as long as he does. And this investment strategy not only delivers for him a check every month, but it also delivers for what he chooses to be philanthropic about. Surprise, surprise, education is where his philanthropy goes. But it then generates this virtuous circle. I also want to take this time to talk about that word fiduciary. It's not a detergent. Tell us a little bit about what that actually means.
Well, as a fiduciary, you're not pursuing your own goals. You're pursuing
personal goals.
Your own personal goals. Your responsibility is to the institution or the individual for whom you're investing the money. So you and there are pretty strict rules from the SEC and others who govern this area about what it means to be a fiduciary. But it is putting your client first and foremost. You put your client first. And so an asset manager who does not put their client first, but is enriching themselves, is not a fiduciary. A board of trustees that isn't paying attention to what the needs and what the enterprise is that the endowment is supporting, and is just bringing their own personal preferences into the room. I always say, park your personal hat at the door and put your institutional hat on when you walk into that investment committee room. And that's a hard transition sometimes to make. And so but it's an important one to make, because even if you are expert in real estate investing or expert in fixed income investing, you can bring that expertise into the room, but you can't let that dominate the opinions or the choices that you make in the room. You have to really think hard about what this institution, what COA needs, what what Harvard needs, what Stanford needs when you walk into that room. So a fiduciary puts the client first, is fair in the execution of his or her duty.
Thanks for that. Let's follow a little bit down the road of us being here at COA. Might you tell us a little bit more about the Intentional Endowments Network?
Mm-hmm.
Why did Cambridge sign on to the network? It's a singular focus on the environment and climate change, a mechanism to deliver financial results and grow the economic and financial return pie.
Mm-hmm.
Singular focus, IEN.
Uh-huh. I've been on the board of IEN for 5 years. IEN has existed, I think the first meeting for IEN was in 2014. And so Intentional Endowment Network, when they approached me to join, I said to them, if this is all about divestment, I can't join, because I think there are many ways in which to address this issue. And divestment is one, and it's if an institution chooses to do that, that's great. But there are other ways in which investors can take action. So they said, it's okay, it's intentional. Intentional is the word we're focused in on. Know what you own, why you own it, and be active in making change. So it grew out of, there's a group called Second Nature, and Second Nature was really designed to work on decarbonizing these campuses. It's also an organization of higher education institutions, and it has existed for a longer time. And it was actually in conversations with Second Nature that the people who founded IEN said, we should be doing this for the endowment too. That's the campus is a major asset, but the endowments are a major asset of these institutions as well. And you shouldn't think of them as this detached pool of assets over here that bears no resemblance whatsoever to our mission and our values, our institutional values. So that's how it launched. And so it's been in place. It's still a startup. I'd still describe it as a startup. But it has expanded beyond just the issues around the environment to include social justice issues. And we know those are inextricably linked. You can't do one without the other, frankly, because so many of the impacts of the environmental damage that is done tends to hurt disadvantaged populations more. So they have looked at how do we integrate these, and we have done that at Cambridge too. We've said it's just inextricably linked. You can't do one without the other. So they have grown. They're now getting some really good gifts from foundations that have helped stabilize the organization financially. We have a great program. I don't know if COA is in this program, where we have a student investment competition where students create portfolios that are teams compete to create good investment portfolios, to learn about the process of investing and to learn how to invest responsibly. And we run that. I think we've been running that for 3 or 4 years now. And it's a great thing for students to be involved in, because it helps them understand how hard it is to invest in endowment. Sometimes it's that endowment seems like this big pot of money out there, and how hard could it be to earn good returns on it? Well, it's really hard. And when you get them engaged in a practicum in which they're making choices, and they're making choices that are consistent with the values of responsible investing, they realize just how hard it is, and develop kind of an appreciation for the hard work that trustees do in governing these institutions. So I love that program. But things like that we're doing now. So
yeah, terrific. You used the word good.
Mm-hmm.
What do you mean by good?
Well, you asked me this yesterday, Joyce, and I had to give it some thought. I knew you were going to ask me again. So I think I'll put it in the context of investing. So not in, and I think it dovetails with a personal view of it. I think fairness matters. I think do no harm. Behave in a way, whether it's personally or in investing, where you do no harm. I think it's important to be bold but pragmatic. And if you're bold and pragmatic in investing, you will be innovative. You will find good opportunities for the portfolio that you're managing. I also think it's important to be patient. You can't move things overnight. You don't want to run into this problem of, oh, if we do this, we're going to give up return. I don't believe that responsible investment requires compromising on return, but you have to be patient. You have to find the opportunities where you do well on the investment and you do good. And that may take some time. So I think it's do no harm, be fair. And there's a piece of me that just says, when faced with a dilemma, I always say, well, what's the right thing to do? Do the right thing. And now many of us will define right in different ways, but you have to, if your true north is do the right thing. Examples from Cambridge, from my experience running Cambridge. Hurricane Katrina, hits New Orleans in 2005. We have clients in New Orleans. So I immediately, said to our board, we're going to suspend all fees for those clients for the next 2 years. They don't need, but we're going to work as hard as we were always working for them. But they don't need to, they have more important things to put their money into, but we're going to help them manage those endowments in the same way we always have. And to me, that's doing the right thing. That's just, there's a crisis there. They're our clients, they're our partners. So let's do the right thing. Let's help them out. Well, one of those schools went to all their investment managers and said, Cambridge is suspending our fees for 2 years. Maybe you should think about suspending our fees. And I got a couple of calls from investment managers who said, are you really doing that? And I said, yeah, of course we're doing that. These people are in crisis. Why wouldn't we do that? We have a successful firm. We can absorb this. We can take a short-term hit, to have our long-term partnership with our clients. That's the right thing. That's an example. How do you think about doing the right thing?
Not as you said, your right thing and my right thing might be
different.
Two different things.
Mm-hmm.
There's diversity in things.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Makes the world interesting.
Makes the world interesting, but how do we trust? How do we build trust when in the sea of do the right thing that can be different on the individual basis, on the corporate basis, in different pockets? How do we, in a world that's demanding that we fish in the whole pond, referral to a part of our conversation yesterday, but how do we build trust?
We communicate. We communicate with one another. We listen. We share our views and we listen to other people's views. We're willing to be persuaded to a different point of view if we think that makes sense, but we communicate. And we make sure everybody has a voice at the table, not just a seat at the table, but a voice at the table.
Come on, man. Not just, it's, speak a little bit more. It's going to be my closing question, but you brought us there. So let's talk about the difference between access and
success.
Access and success.
Well, this is the seat at the table, voice at the table dynamic that I talk about. I spent 9 years of my first 9 years. I worked at an independent school in Massachusetts, Phillips Academy in Andover. I was a member of the faculty, and I was on the admissions office staff there. And we thought a lot about access and success. We were very interested in building a diverse student body. I know the Supreme Court doesn't think that's important, but I do. And so we were very interested in building a diverse student body, but we said it takes more than just having a diverse set of faces at the table. We have to be invested in success as well. So we have to have these two go hand in hand. So when you look at a corporate board, for example, they may have checked the box. They may have a diverse population on that board, but you have to dig a little deeper. So who's chairing the board committees? What roles do they have on the board? Are they really are the people who have been selected to provide diversity in positions where they also have power? And the way you figure that out is who serves on the committees and who chairs the committees and so you have to kind of dig a little deeper if there's a real commitment to diverse voices at the table and diverse points of view, and then are they there? Is it really there? And it's a little bit like ESG. I'm getting off point here a little bit to your question, but I would say 10, 15 years ago, very few investment managers would want to identify themselves as ESG managers. They didn't want that label, even though many of them were evaluating the risks associated with ESG as they made their investment decisions. Then it became more popular. And we saw a real surge of managers who said, we have an ESG program, we employ ESG tools in managing. And for our research team, it became, are they really doing that? Do they know how to do it? Are they experienced at it? Because it was a way for some, we've all heard the term greenwashing, it was a way to gather assets because investors became interested in investing with managers who were employing ESG strategies. And so so suddenly everybody had a strategy, and suddenly our research teams were saying, well, before we used to try and find ones that would admit they were doing it, and many were, and now it was, are they doing it? Now we have to evaluate, do they know how to do it? Are they doing it well? And so there was a greenwashing and asset gathering aspect to it. And what we see now in some of the resistance is folks abandoning it pretty quickly. And that kind of tells you they were in it more for gathering assets as opposed to being deeply committed to that framework, that risk analysis framework that comes with ESG. ESG is not a product, by the way. It's not a product. It's a risk analysis framework that evaluates and identifies financial consequences of not paying attention to those risks. So, sorry, I went off point a little bit.
More than welcome. It's called Coffee and Conversation, not coffee and answer just that one question. So before we turn it over to you guys and get your questions ready, because the conversation part includes you, because Sandy and I could discuss and discuss and discuss, but that's not what you only came here for. Ask your questions directly to Sandy. But before we turn it over to you, could you maybe tell us about why mission-aligned companies, why investing in mission-aligned companies in managing endowments of philanthropic and educational institutions is instrumental in catalyzing systems change?
I think corporations should be in the business of being long-term in the way that they operate. If you're going to be successful as a company, you probably want to be around for a long time. You don't want to be short-term oriented. And that means you have to be tuned in to whatever your product is, how it influences the communities you're in, how you work with your employees to give them stable long-term careers. And if you think about it dovetailing with endowments, these schools and colleges like COA and others are going to be here for a long time. Long after we're not here, COA is going to be here doing what is so important to this institution. I mean, let's face it, Harvard's been around since 1636. It's been here a long time. And these are perpetual institutions. And so I think about investing in companies that have a long-term perspective. They will be successful over the long term. They will be good investments. Endowment investing isn't a trading mentality. It's a long-term investing mentality that, again, dovetails with the long-term time horizon of these institutions. And so I think corporations that are in it for the long term are thinking much more creatively and innovatively and willing to, the word pivot comes up all the time, but willing to pivot, and the world changes. So you can't be stuck in the mud. You have to change. When I joined Cambridge Associates, international developed market investing was considered an alternative. Nobody considers that an alternative today, but it was considered an alternative. And so the world changes. Now we have so many choices in investing. They all have to be evaluated. The world. So you have to adapt. You have to change, and you have to have the good judgment and the good leadership to make changes that will enable, whether it's a school or college or a museum or a company, that will enable you to be part of the fabric of the economy over the long term.
I said that was my last question. Hang on. We've just experienced, just in July, and I find it ironic that it was on July 4th, what many are calling the hottest day in recorded history. Please comment.
Well, it's the coolest July 4th you're ever going to see.
Okay.
It's the coolest one you're ever going to experience again. So just prepare yourselves if we don't do something. By the way, I'm really glad to be here today after that Montana decision yesterday. Did you all see it? I mean, who knows whether it will stand up in court or not, but my gosh, those young people, they are, God bless them, because they're doing the right thing, and they said, Montana, you're going to obey that 1972 law that is on the books here. And the judge said, yep, we are. So if we think, so I'm, you know, we have a problem. I was just talking with Hank earlier. He said, have you read Ministry for the Future? I said, of course. I read it 3 years ago. My husband just inhaled it. You know, and obviously Kim Stanley Robinson is here, you know, locally. But I thought about, when I read the article yesterday about these young people in Montana, I thought, this is what it's about. You know, it so intersects with Ministry for the Future. We are responsible for the safety and well-being of the planet. We cannot abandon it and let it go down, you know, and leave it with our children and grandchildren to deal with. So we have to. We don't have a choice. And that's the way I look at it. We don't have a choice. So.
Okay. We're open for questions.
All right, I'll just ask folks to speak into the mic so that those who are watching online can hear you as well. Start with John.
Hi. What is your take on what happened at Connecticut College this past spring with a number of students? And full disclosure, my niece was one of the original 7 who occupied the president's office to protest what was going on there, which I'm very naive and have a very limited understanding of this, but effectively the straw that broke the college's back was the president went to ask for some money from a group of folks down in Florida, and the student body was very upset by this move. And of course, it's much more complicated than I've just laid out.
Yeah, I mean, students have a right to have a voice and to protest. But again, to me, it's about communication. And so listening to them, I'm not a great fan of students disrupting, you know, presentations and things like that. I think don't attend if you don't want to hear what the person has to say, but don't be disruptive in that setting. You know, you may disagree with the person, but you know, I'm speaking now more about what happened at Stanford in the law school there. But we all have a right to have an opinion. We have a right to express our opinion, but we have to do it in a civil way. And you know, I'm a product of the Vietnam protests, so I know a lot about occupying presidents' offices and closing down schools. I'm of that era, and it can be effective. But but you know, being a college president, this is a hard job.
Hi, dear.
This is a really hard job because you're responsible for the well-being of the institution. You're responsible for the financial security of the institution, but you do have to have some boundaries. You do have to have some boundaries. You have to say, you know, I'm not going to take that money. I'm not going to comment here about a decision I made as CEO about taking money from a particular sovereign wealth fund. But I essentially said to the board when the sovereign wealth fund approached us, and it was going to be a tremendous fee for our firm, a tremendous fee. And I said, you know, if you want to do it, fine, but I'm not going to be here if you do it, because that runs counter to so much that I believe in. So you have to have, so I think people have to have boundaries, and then but you have to communicate and you have to listen. So we have you know, we could arguably say a situation where people aren't listening to each other right now. There isn't civil discourse happening. We need civil discourse, and we can agree to disagree. But at the end of the day, Aaron has to make the decisions for this college and for the future of this college, as does any college president. But there's where trust comes in leadership. Do I trust the leader of the institution? If they're, you know, not that they're going to do exactly what I think they should do, but do I trust they're operating in the best interest of this institution? And so I think those are the tough questions I think people have to think about. Oh. Yeah, I think we have a college.
Like over here.
You stole my question about the Montana decision. But say a little bit more about that. What you think that might mean for the world of socially responsible investment? Because that was on the political side, a state set of policies. What do you think that might say to the investment world?
Well, obviously Montana had a law on the books from 1972 that they activated. I think people will pay attention. I think more and more investors are paying attention. The world of impact investing has grown considerably, and I believe there will be quite a lot of money to be made by participating in impact investing, whether it's in sustainable ag or geoengineering. Dare I say, I'm not sure, I might go out on a limb here, advanced nuclear, these are things that we have to think about if we're going to have not just a transition, but a just transition to a renewable environment, renewable energy world. And so I think more investors are waking up. I think that will get their attention for sure. Now, I don't think you can keep your head in the sand. I don't think an investor can keep their head in the sand anymore. And I think that is a good wake-up call. It's Montana, for goodness sakes. This isn't a place that we think of as, it's not Massachusetts. And so it's
Montana, for goodness sakes.
so it's a place that where these young people are speaking up, and they're challenging the power structure, and that's a good thing. And they're challenging it through the courts. And so it's a little different than Connecticut College, occupying the president's office. They still have a right to do that, but not to be completely disruptive. And so get your voice heard, have the conversation, and I'm not denying them the right to their opinion and to sharing that opinion at all.
Sharing the opinion, and yesterday in our conversation, we agreed that what you give children in copious amounts is love and education. And I truly believe that the impact of yesterday's ruling is the salvo that says the next generation is not here to give the stories that they were given to their children. They have had sufficient education to know that you get a little press coverage out of occupying a president's office. You get national coverage for using the law that their parents put on the books, voted for, thought about, advocated for, and taking it to the next level and holding our feet to the fire. And so as investors in this space, as it becomes mainstream, you will always have people who say, no, yesterday is absolutely how today must be. And by the way, we're going to do it in a way that tomorrow looks just like today. And the young people said, nope, not today. And by the way, we're going to be here tomorrow. Because if you think about it, these are kids that have grown up consuming news, not at 7 o'clock every night in front of everybody sit and watch in front of one television. I'm that old. But they consume it in different forms. And sometimes I think it's not a bunch, it doesn't have a whole lot of depth, but it has that high frequency. So investors who are continue to be more committed to yesterday than tomorrow, just heard yesterday that the young people will not trust you.
And I think I was just going to add to that, if I can just, investors are paying attention to this. They are learning. I mean, it's hard to get a 30-year mortgage on the coast of Florida right now because the lenders don't believe they'll be there for 30 years later. So grown-ups are experiencing the impact of this. So how do you buy property if you can't get insurance? If you can't get a mortgage? Well, you have to pay outright cash. Then But if you don't have insurance and Hurricane Ian comes through, your property is gone. And unless you self-insure, and you're wealthy enough to self-insure, most people aren't. And so there are real impacts. Also, municipal finance is more expensive in these communities. You have to pay more, issue a bond in the communities that are more at risk of seawater rising and so on. So there are real impacts that, this Montana's great and important and a salvo, I agree, but there are real world things happening now for people in the financial world who have real challenges for people who are trying to just live and make a living in some of these communities.
Thank you.
I think I've been out of the loop. I don't know what the decision in Montana was about.
Oh, sorry.
Breaking news.
And I do not know what they were doing in Connecticut and why they were doing that in Connecticut. Could you please tell me that so I could understand what was
I can tell you more
actually
about
going
Montana,
on?
and I'm going to let the gentleman who asked the question about Connecticut fill in a little more about. I think the thing in Connecticut was who you take money from to support the college, and is it tainted money that we take to support the college? But Montana, a group of young people sued Montana. They have a law in the books from 1972 saying that Montana is responsible for taking care of the environment, essentially, and they can't take actions that will put the environment at risk for future generations. And so they sued on that basis because Montana has been in a position where they're denying climate change and denying that fossil fuel have an impact on climate. And so they sued because they felt Montana was not adhering to the laws that were on the books and not protecting the environment in the way they legally, based on the 1972 law, were required to do. No, this is going to be a long process. I think this decision will be challenged in court. So I think we're going to see more activity here. But this was a big step with a judge saying, yep, these young people are right. They have a case. They have a case.
They have a right to clean air.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You had identified employees as stakeholders within companies, one of the stakeholders, and of course to value them for a long-term investment return. But over the past 30, 40 years, in my lifetime, I've seen corporations not value employees as much as when I started out in the working field. For example, there's very, very few defined benefit pension plans.
You're right. Mm-hmm.
Probably the public sector is where that's left.
Mm-hmm.
So do you see a change in that attitude towards employee value within corporations, or is it? What's your perspective on it?
Well, I think it's a really good question, because I think we've seen activity in the investment world that has caused the devaluation of employees in favor of stripping companies of their assets and breaking them apart. And so there's been an effort through financial transactions, which many endowments have invested in, by the way, and many pension funds have invested in private equity. So it's not as though the private equity people didn't have money to invest. They had plenty of money, but it has been, but I think that has been one of the engines for this marginalization of the employees and their positions within these companies. And it could be in healthcare, it could be in manufacturing, you can see it. And yes, one of the ways to extract money from some of these companies was to close out the defined benefit plan, immunize it, and plan for the people who were already in it, and then start a defined contribution plan so that employees had to take responsibility more for their retirement. And so that has been a big shift. Now I think we're getting more wage laws in place that are with minimum wage increases that are happening, and there's a lot of resistance to it, but it is happening in places because people are realizing you know, when you know, in the press, you know, a few years ago, you read that employees at Walmart have to be on food stamps. They're not making enough money to, you know, as employees. You know, now Walmart makes a lot of money, so I think they can well afford to pay their employees, you know, a little bit more, you know, to make it survivable to live. And I think many companies are in that position. But again, I think young people are paying attention to these things. They're paying attention. They're going to vote with their wallets on where they want to purchase items. They're going to look at their employment practices. They're going to look at fair environmental practices as they maybe our generation wasn't as attuned to that. But I think young people are very, very attuned to that, and where they work, you know, the choices they make on where they want to work. They want to work for places where they can be proud to be working there.
Well, where the corporation aligns with their mission. I think that we are writ large at, again, a turning point, a tipping point, where what we define as assets, it's really changing. So I served on a bank board. Wrong language. In English, you the adjective before the noun, on a bank board. And a couple of things there. One, their growth engine was about fintech. So the fintech is PayPal, some of the common words. You see Amazon trying to get into it, Apple Pay. Despite PayPal being at the front and Apple being at the front of those, they have a bank behind it because they cannot legally roll up to the Treasury and say, we're good over here at Apple with the finance unit that we're running. So you have to have a financial intermediary to make your transactions legal. And so they recognize that young people were not looking for their nearest brick and mortar financial institution to come and put in their passbook. You remember those, right? And so when it comes to what we did with employees during the pandemic, at no point did we question sending an extra monitor home, being flexible about whether or not your 8 hours of work started at 12 to 8 o'clock because mom or dad was really online school teacher in the morning, because we sooner supported our employees than not have business continuation. It's that high a risk these days. Not have institutional knowledge, not having almost a business when you wake up on Monday morning. And so let's be blunt about this. Our economy was founded on not paying labor. Our economy was founded on not paying labor. Our kids today are not going to be part of the continuation of that mindset. The interesting part is they are doing so from the couches, from our couches in our basements. And I, for one, have welcomed them to gather their feet at home while they not serve some machine that says, you're not worthy. You're not worthy. Back to banking, we can no longer rely on them owning a house and growing the business on a mortgage product, because they're not sure that individually owning a house is a worthy goal for them. And so there is a move afoot to capture the ability to pay utilities instead of what the 3 privately owned credit rating agencies feed us, to capture consistent payment as a way to assess whether or not somebody is worthy of credit. So change is afoot, and the exciting part is that this change is happening simultaneously. We talked about this yesterday. In the hyper information age that we're living in, and today is the day that you will have the least amount of information. It's only becoming more, and it's 24 hours around the world, right? One has to get comfortable with how do we move forward with impacts coming at us from different directions, and still see that tomorrow is a brighter day, not only for me, but for my neighbor.
There's a question behind you.
I think we have time for another. I guess, Darren, you want the mic?
Thank you. In 2012, COA was one of the first colleges to divest from fossil fuels. Hank Schmelter will remember being there. It was a student-led initiative. It was amazing. Dan Peirce, who was the chair at the time, took some convincing, but we did it. The question then is, we've started to move away from a divestment approach to a more impact investing approach, which I think is a good thing. But what do we do around tobacco? Like, we divested from tobacco in the mid-90s, I think, and each time we meet as an investment committee, we have a tobacco screen, and we rarely, if ever, trigger that screen. But the message that I hear is, if we were invested in tobacco, we would be X basis points better than we are. Is there still room for a divestment approach for something that I don't see how we can invest tobacco to a better place? Because I don't think there is a better place for tobacco. So what are your thoughts there?
I think you have to be true to your values on this one. And, for example, tobacco, nearly all of, I'm going to guess that all of our healthcare institutions that we serve long ago divested from tobacco. You can't be in the health industry and be making money off tobacco over here on the side. They just said that the inconsistency there was so blatant that they just couldn't do it. And so the divestment from tobacco in the healthcare institutions we serve has been there for a very, very long time. And so I think it's about being true to your values. You were one of the first to divest from fossil fuels, and Hampshire College might have been right there side by side with you around that. Around that. I thought they were a little bit ahead. And that's, I found myself saying, well, how can a school that has a single degree in human ecology and complex systems, it made sense to me that you would divest from fossil fuels. Now, over the last couple of years, when fossil fuels were doing really well, probably took not so great for the returns. That's just the way it works. There is some cyclicality, but over time, fossil fuels are becoming less and less a part of the S&P 500 as a percentage, so they're going to have far less impact. Unfortunately, tobacco still has a pretty big impact, but I'd say, you're here with young people, you're trying to promote, health and well-being. I think you're side by side with many. Now, I used to work with some institutions that private prisons. They won't invest in private prisons. They won't invest in firearms manufacturers. So there are many. There's a range of things where you can say it's just so contrary to what our institution believes that we may take a hit on that. But let's figure out how we can find other good choices so that we can diminish or eliminate that hit. And that's what I mean about being patient. It's doable, but you have to be patient and look for the other good choices that are out there. And there are good choices.
And being risk-based, right? Yes, you may get a higher return today, but the hit you will take when it goes sideways for various reasons could not only erase the higher return you get today, but could put you deeper in the hole. And so having bright lights where you do do or don't do is really critical to having the overall trend be upward. And nothing I've heard Sandy say and nothing I've experienced says that by having bright lights on things that don't align with COA and its mission, that's not what's going to undermine COA. If anything, it's lack of resilience, those wide swings that you expose yourself to by biting an apple that doesn't align with what COA is about.
I would add that, we talked about fiduciary duty earlier. So someone could say, well, gee, if we'd been in tobacco, we'd earn a greater return as a fiduciary. Isn't that what we're in the business of doing? And I would say we need to extend the time horizon to think over the long term. Yes, in the short term, to be in fossil fuels over the last couple of years would have been a good thing in terms of return, but it would be so contrary to the mission of this institution, and as a long-term bet, probably not a good one. So that you're in it for the long term, and you have a very long-term time horizon. So that's where the focus should be.
Thank you both very much. Yeah.
Oh.
I also wanted to give a little shout out to Peter, Tom, and Chandler and the rest
Hi
of the
guys.
Cambridge Associates team. I love going to the investment committee because it is not my strength. That is where, and so every committee I have like pages and pages of notes about alpha and beta and BIPs and all these things. But the team has been great.
Yeah, they're great. They're great colleagues. Great colleagues.
So thank you again. And I wanted people to know that next week I was supposed to be in conversation with Darren Ranko of the Penobscot tribe, but Darren's wife is having a health situation. She's going to be okay, but he's unable to come for Tuesday. So we are not going to have a coffee and conversation a week from today. We'll put an all points bulletin out to make sure you don't arrive. But so we'll see you 2 weeks from today, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah.